Hello, and welcome back to Shatter Our Souls and our Metroid Monday. Today is the third episode of the Metroid Prime 2 Echoes, and today I thought, you know, let's focus in a little bit more. The reality of Metroid Prime trilogy as a whole is that Metroid Prime 1 is a bit more of a test. Prime 2 was Retro really showing what they had in store. And we deal with the aftermath of Metroid Prime's fallout, which is the creation of Dark Samus. Now, I personally love Dark Samus because it is every bit as dangerous as Samus herself is. It has her DNA. It has a somewhat copy of Samus's suit. The only thing it lacks is Samus's heart. And so I find it funny and interesting to see how the two of them would react to one another in any way, shape, or form. And the reality is they don't really like each other much at all, but that's aside the point. But one of the things that crops up whenever I think about Metroid Prime 2 is its name in and of itself, Echoes. The storyline of Metroid Prime 2 closely resembles that of Metroid Prime 1. You have a meteor that has impacted a planet, and Samus is dealing with the fallout of said meteor, while also dealing with a secondary threat in the space pirates on said planet. But the thing about Prime 2's execution is that it's far superior in my opinion. Prime 2's execution gives a little bit more context as to the why. Why in the world did Samus end up on this planet? We know that she got caught in a storm on the way in. Her ship was damaged, which is identical to the circumstances that she ended up in Prime 1. Ish. Ish. The ship wasn't damaged in Prime 1. But she did effectively get stuck on the planet for a time. And we're also dealing with another bout of the space pirates. We're dealing with another meteor. We are dealing with another Samus. This is the first time that we actually get to meet Samus's doppelganger. And this doppelganger in Dark Samus is every bit as dangerous as we would perceive it to be. I think that in and of itself is amazing and well thought out naming scheme of the series. Now, going forward here, we are going to be dealing with a bunch of the space pirates. And to be honest, with how my combat circumstances have gone up to this point in the game, a little bit concerned as to how battling some of the bosses later on are going to look. Because, yeah. I've always found Prime 2 to be the hardest game in the trilogy as far as combat goes. And I don't believe that I'm the only one who thinks this. Yeah. Oh man, I just spilled the coffee. Anywho. One thing I feel gets underrepresented about the space pirates as a whole is that for the most part, the space pirates are all function, no form. Their entire organization is built on a few basic mentalities, that being raw power and military might. Anything they deem as unworthy of their eye just gets ignored altogether. They know very little about linguistics. They don't understand architecture or study dead languages. because that in their mind is completely and utterly unimportant. And so they, much like Metroid Prime, are suffering from a lack of understanding. They understand that Dark Samus is a hunter, or the hunter's doppelganger. They know for certain that Dark Samus and Samus are against one another by how Dark Samus reacts when it sees the true Samus. They know there's more at play by how the reactions of the characters within coexist. But they don't necessarily put two and two together to find a solution that will be optimal. I think that's one of the greatest downfalls of this group is that they see themselves as infallible, but they don't really put the time or effort in to give themselves that leg up that they're actually looking for. Personal opinion, at least. But it's all good, right? More combat. We're just gonna tear down the space pirates operation from within. Another thing that I don't think people give Prime 2 enough credit for is its cutscenes. And some of them are as simplistic as, oh yeah, you can see a door close. Whoop-de-doo. But other ones are much more robust in how they affect the viewer, the player. You, in that moment where we're going stealth below the floor, can see the space pirates traveling into dark aether. And it's an immediate, oh yeah, this is cool. They're traveling through a portal, you can see that. You acknowledge that they are what they are doing. And then they disappear. They're gone, only to be found later on the ground, defeated by something. It could be Dark Aether's atmosphere. It could have been the Ing. It could have been Dark Samus herself. We don't have a definitive statement as to what did the damage, only that the damage was done. Another prime example. Dark Samus shows up, destroys the paneling on the floor, locks you out, and prevents you from proceeding forwards, forcing you to backtrack. It's a small little detail, but it does have weight to the entirety of the gameplay and the world as a whole. It defines the expectations and situations Samus is within at any given point in time. And it's also sets the precedent that Samus will likely have to fight back against, or will have to fight Dark Samus at some point. And that Dark Samus isn't going anywhere. You met it in the introduction, and now you get to deal with it more personally. It's kind of there's a little bit of an understatement to it that shows that Dark Samus is after goals much the same as Samus is. And it's setting up an adversarial system. The pair of them working towards competing goals. One focusing on gaining the power of Phazon, the other working on eradicating the power of Phazon. They're diametrically opposed, and yet look more similar than any other characters outside of, the carbon copy space pirates as possible. And honestly, that's amazing. Now, something that I don't think gets talked about enough is the fact that these Metroids are Talon Metroids. This suggests that it's the same Metroids that were brought with Space Pirates to Talon 4 that had at one point or another multiplied to create what they have now. And they're continuing experimentation here. I have two small issues with this. Number one, I don't recall any logs stating that the Space Pirates were able to get off of Talon 4 safely. And this could just be a small detail that I'm missing because, small details happen. But I find it kind of convenient, in a way, that the Space Pirates managed to get off of Talon 4, and yet we don't really see much more than we don't see much more of the Space Pirates than what happens in Agon Waste, the crash site of the Space Pirates. Oy vey, say Space Pirates 4 times fast, I hear. Oy vey. The mentality of it effectively boils down to how contained is their story in Prime 2. Because Prime 1's story is very much all over the place. Prime 2 has the Metroids, has the Space Pirates both involved, and yet it's very selective about how much of the story they're actually showing off to the player through the gameplay. Now, I kind of like this room and I kind of dislike this room. I like how it's formulated. It's a bit of a puzzle room. You're meant to take the time and learn how the different sections of the room would work, how to give yourself effectively a ramp back up to exit the room. It's a very simplistic puzzle, and one that I think doesn't get enough credit for what it is. Because the thing is that by reversing the puzzle, by doing it in the total wrong way, you are able to access an additional health kit, which makes fighting bosses and enemies later down the line much easier. It's one of those small details that should be explored and could be, but they simply haven't at this point, or haven't gone as far into as some of the other details. That's what I want to say. Haven't gone as far into as some details. The other side of things is how in the world do the Space Pirates get around in here? Because, Samus has incredibly over-the-top tools that help with her exploration and traversal of the world, and yet Samus would struggle to get around in here half the time. So how in the world do the pirates do it? Because they don't have Samus's level of technology assisting them. Yes, they have tech, but it's nowhere close. Samus is effectively a god among men compared to these guys. So, last time I kind of touched in on Samus as a character and how likely Samus would be to defeating other games. Specifically, Samus in Prime 1 versus Prime 2. And I realized that the differences between Prime 1 and 2's characters are pretty trivial, with a couple notable exceptions, such as the screw attack. If we were to look at it from that angle for another 2 minutes, it could be said that Samus in Prime 1 is the weakest of the three at her strongest. This isn't to say that Prime 1 Samus is actually weak, simply that Prime 2 and 3 Samus has far more experience than Prime 1. The other side of things is, however, that the later versions of the character don't really pan out to be quite as, well, the latest version, Prime 3's Samus, doesn't pan out to have quite as much going for it as Prime 1's. It's meant to be a battle between equals. Samus versus Samus. And honestly, I love the idea behind the equal combat system. It's something that doesn't get done too well in other games. For example, you could look at Zelda Ocarina of Time's Dark Link battle as being a battle between equals, and you'd be right. But the thing about Ocarina of Time's combat compared to Prime 2's combat, they are two vastly different games. And it is easy to cheese Dark Link in comparison to battling Dark Samus, which has significantly more health. If I'm being honest, on a one-to-one basis, it's Samus's experience that wins the battle, not her strength. Dark Samus has far more power at its disposal, which kind of seems counterintuitive. Dark Samus is stronger than Samus? No way. Well, no. It is and it isn't. We are talking about it being the Metroid Prime prior, a reincarnation of the creature defeated in the alcoves of Talon 4. It makes little sense for this creature that was nigh untouchable on Talon 4 to be unable to battle Samus. This is a battle between the Prime and Samus once again, but the Prime is lacking the experience that Samus has with the same tools and kit that Samus has. What Dark Samus, or the Metroid Prime, has experience with is phase-off. And so it uses its superior strength to its advantage, not its superior skills. That's my mentality on it, at least. I don't know. Do you think that this was an even battle to begin with? Do you think that I'm looking too far into it? Do you think that the Prime trilogy as a whole has some leaps in logic? Let me know. I'd love to hear it. Anywho, Dark Samus is currently about half down. 2/3. Missiles galore have been flying around the arena. And I'm out of missiles. It has super missiles. I am out of missiles entirely. It has what would effectively be the Hyper Beam and super missiles at its disposal. And it barely even flinches when hit by a Power Beam. Yeah, there's no denying that Dark Samus has more power at its disposal. Okay. Now, I've been digging into the dark and light beams, and I'll be honest, I don't know. The dark beam has capabilities that seem to line up with it being able to slow down opponents. An example being holding them in place with an aura of dark energy. But dark energy is so vague that it's hard to really pin it down. Therefore, I am assuming that the cooling effect of the dark energy is roughly that of negative 100 degrees Celsius. It's not an absolute zero. It doesn't have as much of an immediate effect as the ice beam did. What it gains, however, is better energy requirements when dealing with dimensional energy between the two worlds of light and dark aether. That is a mouthful. The light beam is very similar in that it's probably not as strong as the plasma beam, but deals more damage to creatures that covet darkness. The result of that is, theoretically, on a one-to-one basis, Prime 2's weaponry isn't as potent as their alternatives, but is exactly what Samus needs for the mission. Now then, I would guess that the light beam's energy is probably somewhere around 450 degrees Celsius. It's nowhere near as hot as plasma, and its effects are not as pronounced as the plasma beam. So we can assume that it's got a little less kick to it. Now, ordinarily the game wants you to go straight into Dark Aether right after that battle. I don't want to. And the reason being is because A, I have a couple spots that I want to double check for items, and B, simply because I want to get the key to Dark Aether's, or one of the keys to Dark Aether's arena early. Does this mean that I'm going to be wandering back and forth a little bit longer than normal? Absolutely, but this ain't a speed run. It's a marathon. And marathons do take time and take a little bit more care and pacing. Which, honestly, I'm glad I don't run marathons because I would never be able to make it through one. I don't know how to pace anything out properly. Usually it's too slow or way too fast. Anyway. I am going in the wrong direction. Yeah, I have to go towards the dimensional controller. Why am I heading back this way? One of those I'm getting confused by shiny objects. Oh well. Anywho, I have the curiosity, just in general. How many individuals believe that Prime 1 Samus is stronger than Prime 2? How many believe that Prime 2 is stronger than Prime 1? And how they stack up against the various versions from the 2D games. I am of the mindset that the 2D game versions of Samus are far stronger than the Prime Trilogy versions. And there's a pretty big reason behind that, actually. So if you look at Metroid Zero Mission, from the moment that Samus accesses the final upgrade, she turns into an absolute unstoppable force. There is not a single enemy in Prime or, or in the Prime trilogy that would be able to hold their own against the fully powered suit from Metroid Zero Mission. The speed, strength, the way that each of the bomb or each of the weapons combine into one, creating a beam that can penetrate through walls, take up half the screen or half of the available space in front of Samus. It screams that Samus is stronger than we make it out to be. Now, I admit wholeheartedly that this is a 2D game versus a 3D game. This is comparing apples to oranges, and the reason why Samus is so much more slow and sluggish in the Prime games is because they didn't want the individuals playing the games to feel like they were getting sick from the motion or lose control of their character due to the speed at which the character traverses the land. I'm aware of this. But their choices to slow down the character in the Prime games makes Samus feel weaker than in her other iterations. If you look at Metroid Dread versus Prime 2, Metroid Dread Samus is a whole other beast entirely, and is far superior in terms of combat prowess over Samus. This isn't, or over Prime Samus. And again, this has nothing to do with Samus's raw strength. She's always been an absolute behemoth of strength. But she also always lacks something in return, shall we say. Yeah, she gains more out of this, but she loses out on that kind of thing. All in all, where does this leave us? Samus is pretty well unstoppable in the trilogy. And if she's unstoppable in the trilogy, excluding some of her own her own iterations later on, then she is unstoppable as a character under ordinary circumstances. Now, I did kind of see a video where an individual was comparing Samus to other characters, notably the Doomslayer from Doom. And it was funny in that they compared it on a one-to-one basis. Every item, every action that the Slayer was capable of handling or dishing out, they had Samus, or had a specified ability of Samus's that countered it, or acted as a direct comparison. And so, Samus as a whole actually is possibly one of the most devastating characters in all of gaming. Possibly. I would argue there are a few others, but that ends up falling into the realm of gamification and power scaling headaches. So I'm not 100% sure as of yet. I personally believe that the scale of the Metroid universe is far more devastating than the Doom universe, which sounds ridiculous, but be that as it may. And, yeah. Next time, we are going to be popping through Dark Aether. And I think we're going to be dealing with our first main boss, Amorbus. I'll also, I've kind of been of the mindset that I'd like to talk a little bit about other universes while I'm talking about Metroid as a whole, and how Samus would stack up against the various characters from other universes, because I'm a nerd, and that's one of the things I do, fortunately or not, to pass the time. So, if you want to see that kind of content, I am actively working on a script and building that out for the future videos of really this channel as a whole. But now that we're here, I have to say, I look forward to seeing you next week. If you liked the video, drop a like, leave subscribe if you haven't already, and I hope to catch you next time. Until then, I hope you have a good one. Can't imagine what power scaling certain universes would look like, because how do you compare a character who can punch so hard that they can break stone or iron, punch as hard as a rocket hit, and yet we're dealing with characters that are effectively walking nuclear weapons? Like, there's very little comparison.